First pick.
All righty, welcome to another episode of On the Clock. On the Clock's presented by our friends at Titan Bat Company. If you're looking for the highest quality handcrafted wood bats in the game, Titan Bats has you covered with premium maple, ash, and birch game bats in 10 different models and colors to fit your swing and style. As you're gearing up for the spring season, Titan Bats is the perfect option for your next wood bat. In addition to game bats ranging from youth baseball to softball to men's baseball, Titan Bats also offers award bats that make the perfect gift to celebrate a teammate, coach, or baseball fan in your life. Check them out at titanbats.com and take your game to the next level this season. All right, it is Wednesday, February 19th. We're running a day behind. I'm Jared. We got Monty Taylor filling in for Tyler Jennings. Week one is in the books. Monty, have you warmed up yet is the question.
Oh my gosh, you just reminded me. Yes, and I opted that was a big factor in my decision whether to go to Duke or UNC on Tuesday night ahead of this snow that's coming down. And ultimately I went with UNC because the press box exists and has heat. So opted for that over Duke. It was a very cold, windy, wet night on Saturday night, but Duke did win that game. Unfortunately, they lost the series. I think we'll get into that. But yeah, I'm finally warmed up. It's been 2 days, 3 days. Everything's blended together. It's baseball.
We're all trying to wake up too because none of us got any sleep over the last few days either. Tyler and I benefited from being in the warmth of Global Life Field, watching the Shriners College Showdown. Let's talk about that for a little bit. I know you weren't there, but we had some big upsets. Louisville beat Texas and Arizona. Ole Miss beat Clemson in Arizona. The ultimate champion based on runs scored, I believe, was Texas. So Texas won the showdown. I don't know what winning that means at this point. But they had some big wins for them. Want to get your take. I'll dive into some one of those saw there, but what do you think about Ole Miss and Louisville kind of coming out that beating two ranked teams?
You know, I think it was just very easy for me to discard Ole Miss right off the bat as I'm going to pay attention to other SEC teams. Ole Miss is going to be the same because I think I listened to some other people who were thinking the same thing. However, I'm not surprised that Clemson went 2-0 and then had that loss to Ole Miss because I actually called that in another show. I said I could see Clemson going 2-0 and then dropping the third game to Ole Miss. I don't know why I said that. I didn't necessarily have a logical reason. It was just kind of it seems like a Clemson thing to kind of do to really dominate two ranked teams and then slip up against, an Ole Miss. But Ole Miss, that was taking into account that I thought Ole Miss was pretty bad, and that's not necessarily the case. They looked really impressive with their wins over Arizona, a 2-1 win, I believe.
Yeah.
With the return of Elliott, right? What's his first name?
Hunter. Yeah.
Hunter Elliott. I wanted to say Jake Elliott, who's a kicker, but
hey, he could have played baseball. Who knows?
He could have played. Yeah, but I was really impressed with that. That they came out right away and beat Arizona in a pretty fun pitching matchup. But Louisville's back. I'm ready to say it. I mean, they should have been back last year. The bullpen and the pitching staff as a whole just really struggled in conference play. But Patrick Forbes was as good as advertised, I think.
Yeah,
he gave up was it a 2-run blast in the second inning?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, but then 11 strikeouts. He was getting guys whiffing everywhere, and this is a Texas offense that went and then lit up. I mean, you just said they won based on run scored or run differential. So they had to make up the one run that they were in the negative for. So this is a very good Texas offense, and Patrick Forbes shut them down. And then, obviously the offense, the resilience, they had to come back and deliver that walk-off. Just typical Louisville grit there in a way, to use that term. They're not going to hit a ton of power. They're capable of hitting for power, but they're gonna run the bases well, and they're going to hit the ball, and they're going to score runs that way. They're going to score runs. It's just a matter of whether they've improved in the pitching side as to whether they can, return to the NCAA tournament after a 2-year hiatus.
Yeah. So I'll give you kind of my take on what I think about this entire showdown, because I was very confused by these teams. Like, you had Ole Miss, right? You talked about the Arizona win 2-1. The next day they go and get 10 run ruled basically by Texas. I'm trying to get the order right. They got 10 run ruled by Texas, and then they rout Clemson 15-5. So I'm like, what is going on? And the same thing happened to Louisville, right? Louisville wins against Texas, gets almost 10 run ruled by Oklahoma State, and then goes on uh, to win the next game. And so I'm just like, and then Clemson, same thing. They went 2-1, got 10 run ruled at one point. It's just like, I was trying to think about our top 25 rankings coming out of this, and the only team I could think about putting into the top 25 was Cincinnati, who you saw against Duke and took 2 out of 3 against the Duke Blue Devils. Talk a little bit about that matchup.
We already discussed the weather a little bit. It was the triangle was rough. I mean, it was interesting that Duke was the one school in the triangle area that did not, and if we include Wake Forest as well, was the only one that didn't try to move around and avoid weather as much. I mean, they did avoid the times around, but they didn't move days. So they still played 3 games in 3 days, whereas NC State and UNC moved into a doubleheader on Friday and finished up on Saturday. Wake Forest had a 4-game series, so they did all sorts of weird things with theirs. But it was cold and it was wet, and Duke didn't play particularly well. And it really suited Cincinnati style because they're a scrappy, pesky, annoying baseball team that's going to play clean, and they're going to get in your head. I was not prepared for the energy they bring. It's a very unique energy, and it worked. And Duke made mistakes, and Cincinnati took advantage of it, and Duke ultimately pretty lucky to not be swept.
Yeah, they barely
Kyle
lost
Johnson
that.
did.
I was going to say the Cincinnati barely lost that second game.
Yeah, it was a walk-off home run by Wallace Clark.
Yeah.
KJ didn't have his best stuff Friday. James Talon didn't have good stuff Sunday. The offense, I mean, AJ Grazia had 1 hit. I mean, he did walk several times. Ben Miller only had the 1 hit. It was the home run that he had in his first at bat. Jake Hyde had nothing. Outside of Albright and Wally Clark at the bottom of the lineup, you didn't have much offense, especially in key situations.
Yeah, I did. So I kind of bucketed Louisville, Ole Miss, and Cincinnati into the same because they all went 2-1 against ranked teams, and I was trying to figure out, okay, like who would you put in the top 25? And I feel like Cincinnati taking out like number 10. I think Duke's number 10 on our list. That's the most impressive to me. They also didn't get 10 run ruled like the other teams did, but I saw a lot of like what you saw in Cincinnati and Louisville. Like that team has a ton of team chemistry. That coach, I don't think I've seen a coach believe in his guys more than Louisville's head coach. And it was impressive to watch them play together. Like it's hard to do that and develop that team chemistry naturally, given like the transfer portal and things like that. But it's just a scrappy team. Like they don't hit a ton of bombs. Like they're not like that home run hitting team, and they just go out and play, and they play hard. And I think that's what really most impressed me. If I was to take out of the 3, Cincinnati, Louisville, and Ole Miss, and who was going to put number 2, I'd probably put Louisville as the second one that I'd want to potentially put in. Just like you mentioned, Forbes rotation absolutely disgusting. And then even after Forbes. Parker Detmers threw pretty well for the first 3 innings, kind of lost it in the 4th, and that's when they ended up ultimately getting 10 run ruled by Oklahoma State. But like if he's able to find whatever he had in the first 3 innings and keep that consistent in a longer outing, like I don't know, Louisville's going to be potentially very nasty.
Yeah, it was very interesting because they didn't have Brennan Cutts, the Missouri Valley pitcher of the year from last year, in their rotation. He came out of the bullpen, I think, on Sunday with another one of their best relievers in Colton Hartman, who was their Sunday starter last year. And that they came in behind a pretty good start from Peter Michael against Arizona. So it was interesting that a lot of their best pitchers were kind of saved to try and win the weekend. That may have been the strategy. But one thing I loved about Louisville, seeing it, and sometimes it takes a while sometimes. You mentioned the team chemistry. It can take a while to establish the identity as well of the team because, again, these are different teams every year. But that was a Louisville team to the T. It was a Dan McDonald team right away. There's been times in the past 2 years where it was hard to kind of find that identity, and it felt like right off the bat, pun intended, that they were able to find that team identity that they really need. And I'm excited to see how they handle a loaded ACC.
Yeah. And I think just watching them play this weekend and get those 2 big wins against ranked teams, just like I've watched every interview with their head coach, and he's just like, everybody's sleeping on us. Like basically that's all he's been saying. And it seems like it might be true.
except for Micah, who ranked them number 22 in his preseason poll.
I dig it. Hey, he's feeling good then after this weekend.
Oh yeah. I mean, he was very excited about that. So yeah, it was pretty funny to watch his because he was very quick to get those post game interviews with Zion and Lucas Moore and Dan McDonald. So happy for him to get that because I mean, all my friends were there.
Yeah.
All my buddies were in Texas. I was in the Triangle myself, but yeah, it was a great weekend. Very jealous of you guys, especially once I tried to make the drives to multiple parks in a day. I know Tyler did that a couple times as well, going to DBU, but it's so much easier when you're going to multiple games, but you're the one that's not leaving. You just stay there and wait for the next one. But when you have to go back and forth, even though it's like a 20-minute drive from Chapel Hill to Durham, it's a little bit more exhausting doing all that.
Yeah, then Tyler had me there to run cameras for him. So like, see, he was good to go. He didn't have a backup. Let's talk about we talked about the positive teams and the things that went well. Let's talk about some of the negative ones. I want to start with the poor University of Arizona Wildcats, man. They came in probably with what was considered the easiest schedule in the Shriners College Showdown. They had Ole Miss, I believe it was Clemson, and then Arizona. And so Louisville, sorry. So they had two unranked teams where I think everybody else at least played two ranked teams. The pitching staff looked good against Ole Miss. Like Colin McKinney threw really well. They stayed in that game, but the offense was just silenced by Hunter Elliott in the bullpen for Ole Miss. Then when they played, Clemson, yeah. When they played Clemson, I mean, it was just a rout. Like the Tigers took an 8-0 lead to start. Arizona started.
There was one extra base hit, I believe. Yes. I think that was it. All the rest were singles to death.
They peppered Clemson Tigers peppered the crap out of the ball. Like they just hit. Like they got a couple boppers in that lineup, but for up to down, like it's not full of ton of power. They just hit contact after contact, and they just wore the Wildcats down.
I know we're talking about Ole Miss, but I mean Colin Priest. How impressed were you with him? I mean, he's a big boy. I mean, did you get a chance to see him take batting practice at all? Because he's
big, man, and he hits the ball hard.
Yeah, that's what stuck out to me when I went down for their fall game. Is every one of his hits in BP were like 105, 110 plus.
Yeah.
So I was like circling him, and then of course he had a huge game in that scrimmage. So I was excited. I was stunned when he wasn't in the lineup on Friday against Oklahoma State, but he looked good. Tristan Becerra is the guy who did hit the double in that first inning. He's a big bopper, but that Clemson lineup, I think they can win in a variety of ways, including stringing those hits together and peppering the crap out of you like we saw.
Mm-hmm.
And then they can also rely on the home run ball when they need it. They just didn't need it in that game.
Yeah, and Dominic Listy at the top of the lineup, 3 for 5, 2 doubles, 4 RBIs against Arizona. Absolutely insane. Cam Canarella struggled in game 1 for Clemson, struggled with the fastball. Game 2, though, 4 for 6, hit 3 doubles, RBIs.
And then game 3, 0 for 2 with a with a walk. So yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, Dominic Listy was one of the options for another Indiana State guy, by the way, along with Brennan Cutts, we've already mentioned. But Dom Listy was one of the nominations, I believe, for Player of the Week. With what he did. He didn't have any extra base hits, but he had a bunch of hits and then some RBIs. And I mean, just an outstanding addition to that outfield.
Yeah. And at first I thought Arizona was going to make a comeback in that Clemson game, right? They got a 3-run home run from Brennan Summerhill, brings them back into 8-5. And then the top of the 9th, Clemson is like, we're going to score 9.
At least you got to see a Summerhill home run despite the disappointing weekend.
Yeah.
How did Mason White look at shortstop?
Mason White looked fine. He seems like he's more well suited for second base than he is for shortstop.
Which is the case for most.
Yeah.
I think most college shortstops these days.
You throw Mason White a soft toss and lefty, man, and that guy is swinging and missing like crazy. If he gets a fastball, though, he absolutely torches it. He's got some insane juice. He hit 2 home runs this weekend, and they were allowed off the bat. And he knew they were gone as soon as he hit them. But man, when they were facing Clemson and it was Darden on the mound, he struck out 3 times, I think.
I love soft tossing lefties, but yeah, it's got to be frustrating because it's like Why can't I hit this guy? Throw me 95.
Yeah.
I'll hit it.
Yeah, that's all he was looking for. It's what he wanted.
Yeah.
The other team we got to talk about that was not at Shriners, but was in Arizona that did not do well. They were our number 25 ranked team, Indiana. They lost to UNLV, Xavier, and Oregon State. Oregon State, losing to that team, that's fine. But they went down there and lost to UNLV and Xavier. What do you think about this Big Ten team?
It's not good.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying the team's not good. I'm saying that result's not good. I mean, you've still got a chance. I mean, the thing is, we have to react to what we've been given, which is a very small sample size. So there's going to be a high percentage of incorrect takes from any expert that is reacting purely on this weekend, because there's still so much time to make a difference. But the indications that we saw from Indiana, not great.
No.
They did have to face. Did they have to face Dax Whitney on Sunday?
No. I thought that they faced. I thought Dax Whitney. When did Dax Whitney throw? I thought he was.
I thought he went. I will.
Maybe
check,
it was Saturday.
Yeah, he may have gone before then, but yeah. What I mean, just
if he did go, he might have gone on Sunday. No. Yeah.
Well, he was named. He was named the Perfect Game National Pitcher of the Week. His electric debut.
UNLV.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, he got UNLV, but that was nasty. I mean, before we get into Indiana, it's because you brought up Dax Whitney.
Sorry.
98 miles an hour with 22 IVB, 22 inches of invertible. That's nuts. I mean, that for a freshman. Like, he might be the best pitcher in college baseball as a freshman.
We will see. I mean, if he can continue to command like he did in that game, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean,
that's the key. There's freshmen that can throw 98, 99, 100. The question is, can you paint at that level?
Yeah.
And that's where he will separate himself if he's able to do that.
And he does it with such conviction, though. Like, I've never seen a freshman that poised on the mound. Like, the fact that he didn't sign on the major league team, sorry, that's wild to me. Like, that guy had good stuff coming out as a prep.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing for college baseball.
Yeah.
Everybody should be going to college.
Well, then you got like Kason Evans and William Schmidt just throwing 98 to hundo out of the bullpen for LSU. We'll get into that later, but that's nuts.
Yeah.
2 freshmen, by the way. Add them to the list. Yeah. It's insane. But back to Indiana. I was going through their stats before we got on here. They hit 211 over the weekend, and they posted a 7.25 ERA.
You got to clean that up.
Yeah.
I mean,
those numbers were after the game that they played 4 this weekend, right? Yeah. They got 4 in.
Yeah.
Ultimately,
4. They can always get in via the Big Ten tournament title.
Yeah.
But if they're looking to feel safe going into the Big Ten tournament, they've got to figure out a way to play better baseball and be able to create a resume that allows them to feel safe. Otherwise, they'll be playing for their lives in that Big Ten tournament at the end of the year.
Yeah. And the 2 top hitters in that lineup are probably Jason Oliver and Devin Taylor. Jason Oliver went 3 for 18, and then Devin Taylor went 4 for 17. Like, those guys can't be doing that if you want to win games.
Nope.
Yeah. We'll go back to some more positive of unranked teams that I think really impressed this week. Talk a little bit about Michigan. They went down to Puerto Rico. They beat number 3 ranked Virginia, and they played pretty well. What are your thoughts on the Michigan Wolverines?
The pitching was absolutely fantastic. I mean,
yeah,
they beat everybody. They beat Stetson, who was also 3-0 on Monday, which we expected a little bit closer game, I think, and they kind of just easily won that game against Stetson. The pitching looks legit. I mean, to be able to shut down that Virginia lineup, I know the lineup didn't play particularly well all weekend. Ultimately, they did score 7 against Rice, but they only managed 3 against Villanova.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I would have told myself that Virginia going 2-1 in that area would have been a failure. But given how their pitching looked, I think they're fine.
Yeah.
Their offense is not going to be a problem. But the pitching without Evan Blanco was rather impressive. So I'd have to backtrack my statements on that. But Michigan, I think, was the biggest winner coming out of Puerto Rico. Obviously, Penn State looked good, Stetson looked good, but Michigan for me was the real winner, and obviously they were the best team there. And I think it's interesting because I think I saw them all around the place for Big Ten projections and standings. So it didn't seem like anyone really had a consensus thought on Michigan because I saw them at times, 4 or 5, but then there were other times I saw them like 12, 13 area.
Yeah.
So I think it's clear that they are a threat because if that pitching could do that, and again, Puerto Rico is not cold weather. You're not getting that helpful kind of thing that you might see somewhere else. So the fact they were able to shut down, I mean, the Virginia scoreline says everything.
Yeah. And then they scored 19 against Villanova. So sorry, Villanova.
Yeah.
Mitch Voigt, got to talk about him a little bit. Hit 471.
Can
doubles.
he pitch right now? Or because I thought he had a pitching injury, so I think he's only one way this year, right?
I think so because he didn't pitch this weekend. So
yeah.
And there was 4 games.
Legit either way, but yeah, he's legit either way. But yeah, if they needed it, if he could pitch, he would have pitched.
Yeah, it's nuts. That was impressive. Another team that impressed me was Arizona State. They went and just absolutely kind of took it to Ohio State. I just think this team is very underrated. That lineup from top to bottom is so good. You have Kean Vu, you have Isaiah Jackson, you have Brandon Compton, and then you have Ben Jacobs on Friday nights. Like, you're going to get a good start from your Friday night guy, and it's hard to find a legit Friday night guy. Like, I do think this team is quite underrated in the Big 12, and I think I wrote about them in our Big 12 conference preview as like one of those teams to watch, because if the back end of that rotation can figure it out behind Ben Jacobs, like, they're going to be pretty good.
Yeah, we need some of those West Coast teams to, I'm counting Arizona as West Coast, even though they're not quite coast. But, we need those teams to kind of have a little bit of a resurgence. The Stanfords, even though Stanford's only had one bad year, but the Stanfords, the Arizona States, baseball is just better with them in it. And as much as I would prefer an ACC, SEC showdown in Omaha again, just for my own selfish reasons, I don't know if that's the best for baseball overall, but Arizona State being good again would really do great things for the sport. I'm excited to see that. And obviously, they had an even better weekend than most teams because their biggest rival went 0-3.
Yeah,
on the national spotlight.
Yeah, as someone who was a student manager at Arizona State in 2009 when they won like 50 something games, it would be great to see them get back to that point where they're just like winning, just one of the top teams on the West Coast, because they're one of the most historic franchises or historic teams in college baseball. Like, you think about College World Series appearances, and like for years you just automatically penciled in ASU to go to Omaha. You don't do that anymore.
Yep.
Next team I want to go to is the TCU Horned Frogs. This was the team that I thought was going to have a big chip on their shoulders, given last year's somewhat snub in performance that they had in the Big 12 as well. Went 4-0 against San Diego, and they went 4-0 in a real nice fashion. Noah Frankel, the freshman, just hit moonballs while he was playing San Diego. Carson Bowen raked, not shocking. Cole Kramer raked. Isaiah Cadena, the new guy from Ohio State who came over with Bill Masiello, absolutely raked. Pitching staff was insanely good. Tommy Lepore shoved. Brandon Sloan shoved. I mean, Trevor Baumler shoved. Like, the entire pitching staff did well. And again, another team in the Big 12.
Not the entire pitching staff.
What, Caden Parker?
You didn't mention the
Caden Parker.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm losing my mind.
Sorry, he gave up 3 earned runs over 4 1/3.
Wait, did Abelt go to TCU?
Who?
Abelt?
Abelt? Yeah, but he's out for the season.
Right, that's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
In the room, I was just sitting there. I was like, "Am I getting the team wrong?"
Gotcha. Yeah. And they did that without Abelt.
Right, he got lost just in the last week. So that's immediate adversity. Everyone's talking about, oh man, if only he, and they came and responded like that. That's why I was just making sure. I was like, do I have the right team? Why is Jared confused?
I was confused on what we were talking about there for a second.
My bad.
Yeah. But no, really impressed with the Horned Frogs. I think they're another team that's like probably right on the outside of the top 25. Possibly should be in our top 25 if we're going to bounce Arizona and Indiana on our update. So we'll have that update. We're going to give it another weekend, and we're going to do a bi-weekly update to the top 25. So just want to make sure you keep an eye on some of those teams. But what did you think of TCU?
I thought it was impressive. They were a team that I didn't pay attention to last year and was very surprised when we had them, because at the beginning of the year they got to number 5 in the country because they had one of those really good performances in an early tournament, and then I didn't pay attention to them, and then all of a sudden I was like, wait, TCU didn't even make the tournament?
Yeah.
I was very thrown because once conference play starts, I can get really zoomed in on the ACC and the SEC, and then all of a sudden some of the other schools, I'm like, wait, what happened to them? And that was TCU, and I thought that was a great way to respond. I was really impressed with that. San Diego is a good team.
Yeah.
This is a good mid-major. This is not your tune-up series. Like, yes, it's technically probably an inferior opponent historically, but it's a lot closer in terms of some teams that are playing really lower end programs to start their year. So I thought it was just an extremely impressive result. 4 wins is really difficult to do against one team.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah, I mean, Cal figured that out against Nevada. Stanford almost figured that out against Cal State Fullerton. Some of these teams, it's very hard to win 4 games against one opponent, and for TCU to do that and do it with emphasis is just absolutely impressive, and maybe they're the best team in the Big 12.
Yeah, I love it. I do want to, speaking of mid-majors, you mentioned some mid-majors. I want to get into a couple of them. First is, what's that?
I said Gardner Webb. I was making a joke.
No, sorry, Monty. I hate to disappoint you here. First one's UC Santa Barbara. Went 3-0 against Campbell. Not the same Justin Eric Campbell team that used to have back in the day, but they outscored them 27-7. Not great. But that pitching staff, Tyler Bremer went 3 innings, struck out 2. He got pulled early out of his start. It sounded like he had some tightness and just he didn't want to come out of the game. Their head coach was mentioning. So I don't think anything's a big concern there. Jackson Flora, absolutely disgusting. Up to 98. This kid's going to be like a big draft guy next year. 5 innings, 6 Ks. I like this Santa Barbara team. I think they're somewhat underrated. I think everybody always has the concerns with the bats of Santa Barbara, which makes sense. They've always had to struggle to produce at the plate. But what do you got on UCSB?
I mean, you're high on them. They were your pick outside the top 25, I think, to go to Omaha. So, I mean, to have that kind of a pitching performance with Bremner only throwing 3 innings and being pulled early, I did see that, and I was a little concerned. So I'm glad you just cleared that up for me. But the pitching is going to be fine. They're going to hit enough.
Yeah.
The question is, once they get in the tournament, are they going to hit enough against premier pitching? And I mean, this is a great start. All you can do is build on, your beginning. And I mean, that pitching staff is just electric, and I'm excited to tune into more West Coast games because, if I'm staying up late, those are one of the teams that, I'm going to want to keep my eye on.
Yeah. I've already put it in the books. This team's going to hit against better competition, and they're going to go to Omaha. You can put that on the board. UC Santa Barbara.
Right next to my Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets.
Yep. That'll be it.
We're going to manifest it.
We're going to put it into the ether here. Next team I want to talk about is the Dallas Baptists. And the reason I want to talk about that is they went undefeated over the weekend, and we're recording this on Tuesday night, dropping Wednesday morning. They played UTRGV and got 10 run ruled. I don't even know. It's the University of Texas.
Rio Grande
Valley. Yeah.
Rio Grande Valley. I was trying to remember. What's the V?
It's a midweek game, granted, but they lost 15-5. DBU's, I think, in like 21 or 22 in our top 25 ranking. What do we got on DBU?
Jared. I know it's the first midweek of the year, but I've already been dealing with NC State fans who lost a midweek game. Keep in mind, NC State went 3-6 in midweeks last year, and what did they end up? Where did they end up at the end of the year? Omaha.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yep.
So, I
Yep.
mean, the midweeks, I wouldn't put too much into this for DBU. Obviously, if it becomes a trend, that's concerning. But what they did over the weekend should be celebrated and more of the focus than a midweek. Obviously, they've got some great players there. James L. Winger. I know Tyler got to see him, and that was fantastic. He was electric. He's a guy I wrote about over the summer up in the Cape, and he's got some electric stuff if he can harness that command, which it sounds like he did this weekend. So if I'm DBU, I'm over the moon. Forget about the one midweek. Don't overreact. If it keeps happening, that's when you want to start, worrying. But it's going to be okay.
The LSU transfer, Micah Bucknam, going on Friday night too. Absolutely disgusting.
Yeah.
So they got a good 1-2 punch to come at people. They're going to need more out of Michael DiTallo. He's their kind of big bat in the lineup. I think he hits second, mostly first baseman. Apparently, Tyler saw him and just could not get anything done. He struggled again today on Tuesday night. So that's going to be the guy that they need to get going if they want to have some success.
And some guys can have slow starts, and then you are quickly forgotten about.
Yeah. Speaking of guys who didn't have slow starts, we should get into some individual performances. We have our player and pitcher of the week. I want to go through the pitcher of the week because he's a Virginia guy, and you've seen him a few times. Tomas Valincius, is that how you say it?
Valincius. I used to say Valincius, but it's Valincius.
6 innings. Was it 11 punchies? 10 punchies?
It was 10.
10 punch outs, 1 hit, no runs,
no walks,
walks.
Only 66 pitches, 51 strikes.
That's insane. Most important detail is he's a freshman and he was making his collegiate debut.
And I think that's what made us decide on him being the pitcher of the week. We obviously had several options. Pierce Coppola at Florida was fantastic. I think that was our choice behind Tomas because our original choice was actually Jamie Arnold after Friday night. We were like, yeah, Jamie Arnold. And then Saturday, it was Griffin Hugas and then Pierce Coppola. And then we finally settled on Tomas Valincius. But, I mean, there's so many options. I think at one point you're like, do you want to do the conference play? I was like, no. Let's stick to the national. But yeah, Tomas Valincius, absolutely electric. Would he have been the Sunday starter if Evan Blanco was healthy? I don't know because, they don't have a midweek anymore because of the weather. But, would Valincius or Bryson Moore have ended up in the midweek role based on the starting order? It seems like it would have been Valincius, but instead we get to see him on a Sunday, and Virginia really needed to respond in a big way following the loss to Michigan, and they had great starts from Bryson Moore, and then the electric start by Tomas to win the weekend was absolutely huge. And like I said earlier, I would have seen originally 2-1 as a failure of a weekend for Virginia, given the level of competition in that lineup. But the pitching was just so good that you leave Puerto Rico feeling really good despite that Michigan loss.
Yeah. And it's just wild. 66 pitches to get through 6 innings. That's unheard of these days. And have a freshman do that, that's nice. You got to love it.
Oh, yeah.
Player of the week. These are fun stats to read off. This is Merrick Houston from Wake Forest. Most of you probably already know who Merrick is, but he went 10 for 14, 714 batting average, 789 OBP, 1018 OPS, 3 home runs, 13 RBIs, 11 runs scored. That's not bad. That's a pretty good day. He had 2 stolen bases on top of that.
Did you say the walks too?
I did not say the walks.
There were 5 more. Yeah. That's what's most impressive is he was on base 15 of 19 times.
That's nuts. That's absolutely absurd.
I did vote for him as my ACC pitcher of the week. Sorry, player of the week. He was my official vote, so I thought that was pretty cut and dry. Although there were some outstanding performances within the conference, but that's just otherworldly. Enough said. Who was his main competition? Jace Laviolette?
Yeah, well, he was good. I there just wasn't really another guy. I know you had someone in the ACC you were watching, right?
Yeah, there was a number of guys. I mean, Sam Tackett's the only guy that had more a higher batting average. He was 7 of 9 with a 500-foot home run,
That's
uh,
nuts.
which I messaged you about, and you were like,
Yeah.
okay. Um, and then I was looking at, Drew Farrow had a really good first two games, and I was like, all right, he might be in the conversation with Merrick, but he had a good Sunday, but not what Merrick did.
Yeah.
So ultimately, it was an easy decision at the end of the day. The pitching one was a little tougher because you had Forbes, who was so good against
Yeah.
elite competition. You had Valincius, who was making his first collegiate start, and then you had Griffin Hughes, who was
Nasty.
just absolutely nasty for Miami. And I again he's another one of those guys that I got to write about. So I watched every fifth. He made 15 appearances in the Cape, 13 in the regular season, 2 in the playoffs, and none of them were starts. He did have some starter innings, but he didn't start any games. But he was electric, and watching him develop over the course of the summer was impressive because he just got so good to the point where in the playoffs he was throwing 5 shutout innings and giving up 1 hit. And so I was not at all surprised at what he did on Saturday. Very happy for him. 11 strikeouts. I think Tyler said Tyler gave us the stats on the whiffs. It was absolutely insane.
Nuts.
Just a fantastic performance.
For me, he popped onto my radar because I think we've had him as like a draft prospect, but that performance and what he did in the Cape, I think is really we're talking about guys who might have like catapulted themselves in terms of draft boards this weekend. And Griffin Hughes, I mean, that's as impressive as you can get. And if you want to like raise your draft stock, I mean, that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, I'd say so. Let me see where we talk too much.
In our draft chat, yeah.
Yeah. 22 whiffs, 14 on the fastball alone. And he's a guy that likes to go after people and challenge them. I got to interview him in the fall as well. So he's a great kid. Somebody, I'm rooting for. I'm personally actually rooting for a Miami Presbyterian regional because his brother is a catcher at Presbyterian. So I would love a Hughes versus Hughes matchup in a regional. That would be the stuff of dreams.
What are the chances Presbyterians making it to the regional?
So the chances, they got to win the automatic bid, but they should be in the conversation in the Big South.
Oh,
Gardner Webb's in there. USC
is Gardner Webb in there only because you want Gardner Webb in there?
No. They should be in there. Yeah, those teams, it's going to be tough because, again, you have to win the conference tournament. Otherwise, your season's over. So there is a decent chance if they win the tournament. But obviously, the chances are slim because they have to win the tournament and then get selected for the one regional I need them to get selected for. And Miami then has to do their job and make the tournament as well. So,
yeah, it's insane. Another guy I want to talk about MLB Draft related is Luke Hill. Shortstop out of Ole Miss. He was in the Shriners College Showdown, and he put on a show for everybody. He went 5 for 9, triple, 2 home runs, 6 RBIs, 2 walks. Both home runs, 100 miles an hour exit velo on one, 107 mile an hour on another. This is a guy we interviewed in the offseason, and one thing he talked about on the podcast is like his goal is to really tap into his power. He thinks that's the one thing that's kind of holding him back as a prospect, and he like really focused on that in the offseason, and he did it. I mean, he hit 2 home runs, hit a triple. 3 of his 5 hits were extra base hits. And this is something he can sustain throughout the entire season. Like that's huge for his draft stock and his draft profile.
I mean, that's similar to our player of the week. Merrick Houston made the point to work on his power, and he had 3 home runs over the weekend. Granted, the couch is not Arlington, but yeah, I mean,
Merrick
true. Houston, Merrick Houston, if those powers are sustained, he's going to jump up much higher into the draft conversation to a top 10 pick potentially. But yeah, Luke Hill, was he playing shortstop or was he?
He was playing short.
Where do they have?
Oh no, sorry, he was playing third base. Owen
Okay.
Pano was playing shortstop.
That's what I thought. I thought Pano was playing short. So yeah, I mean, just really exciting stuff. And again, to do that against elite pitching, or as elite as we can get opening weekend,
Yeah.
pretty impressive stuff.
Yep. So keep an eye on that kid. Any other news notes that we're missing? We didn't talk about the 1 and 2 teams, I guess. And we can talk about them. They played Hofstra and somebody else and demolished them. So I don't know what you want me to say about Texas A&M and Tennessee at this point. Hashtag
When
good.
when when we were looking at stuff, I just went and looked, and I was like, it doesn't seem like they did their jobs and they did it well, and that's all. I mean,
Yeah. Like they're 1 and 2 still. Like nothing changed. Yep.
yeah.
The only other thing I'll note, it was really cool to see Hunter Elliott on the mound for Ole Miss. Hasn't pitched since 23, I think.
Yeah, he got hurt
right
before the season in 24.
Yeah. And so just to see him go out there, go 5 scoreless innings, and just giving up 2 hits, like that's awesome. Fastball was in the low 90s. It was just cool to see him out there. We got to talk about your Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. They were insanely good this weekend, and Drew Burris, walk-off grand slam. How happy were you?
I was ecstatic. I love Drew Burris as a person. He's a very loyal and competitive, and he loves baseball. Like I asked everyone this question, like, what would you do if you were like outside of baseball? And he cannot give an answer because, his family is
it.
Yeah. So like his dad is one of the biggest like AAU coaches in Georgia. So like he doesn't have a choice. Like obviously he does. He loves baseball, but he couldn't imagine without it. So I was very happy for him. I mean, I immediately messaged him because he and I have been talking about the pitching all off season, and he had told me when I picked Tate McKee as like a dark horse candidate for pitcher of the year, he was like, dude, he might be. And I was like, Drew, thank you for that. Because, I'm out there yelling it, and it's good to hear that I might be right. But I didn't even text about the Grand Slam. I messaged him, and he was just like, I'm telling you, man, we haven't even had our best, some really good arms go. And yesterday they had Mason Patel go, he retired 16 straight batters.
Nuts.
In relief. He just comes in, and the bullpen has been absolutely insane. And if their offense had played like this last year in opening weekend, they would not have won the games that they did because the pitching looks to have taken a step forward. The biggest thing for me is they are throwing strikes, being aggressive, being confident, and not nibbling and losing command like they have in the past. And that's the biggest indicator to me in their progress. I'm really excited to see that because Matt Taylor has done a fantastic job. That's the other thing is like he was in his first year as pitching coach last year. So now you've got a really established identity here in year 2. So I'm really excited. And if they have that pitching together as it seems to be, my Omaha pick doesn't look so ridiculous now, does it?
UCSB, Georgia Tech. We'll see you in Omaha.
Absolutely.
That kind of does it for us. If you're looking for any of the new content that we have out, we have a bunch of weekend recaps from this past opening day weekend. So if you missed any of the news, I got coverage of Shriners. Monty's got his Monty's musings from all the games that he was at, quotes from coaches, players, all that fun stuff. So be sure to check that out as well. JD Cameron on our team has a really good piece out looking at the catchers in the draft. So you got like Luke Stevenson, Caden Bodine, Ike Irish, the top 3 catchers, and he kind of breaks down the numbers and the data behind those guys and kind of what makes them so special. We also got interviews with associate head coach for the University of Texas, Nolan Kane, that's out. Wake Forest, Merrick Houston, we talked about him a ton on the pod. We had an interview that we did this offseason. We just dropped that today. We'll finally be dropping an RJ Austin interview that Monty and I did like back in the early November. We got all these draft prospect interviews that kind of just got held up as we made the transition to just baseball. So we're going to be dropping those all week. And we'll have more coverage coming to you next weekend. We'll have a bi-weekly top 25 update. We'll have more Monty's musings coming out. So yeah, Monty, you got anything before we wrap up? Any final thoughts?
I get to go to a tournament this weekend in the sun, and you are going to be dumped snow on. By the time this comes out, you've probably got a ton of snow on you, and I'll be in warmer weather.
Yeah. Yep. I don't have any games this weekend, so I am not going to be anywhere. Stuck at home. But I will be out at the 2 powerhouse schools the weekend after. University of Maine versus George Washington. The teams that everybody's been waiting to see.
I'm hearing George Washington might have some dudes.
They got a couple arms. They usually have an arm or two. sometimes.
So hey, and the Atlantic 10 feels like it's wide open with the transition VCUs going through, and so hey, I mean, you never know. You mock the powerhouses, but some quality baseball.
Maine's got a lefty throwing 96. That used to be a top
That's
prospect.
ridiculous. That's outrageous. That Maine just casually has a guy throwing 96.
Not just throwing 96, sitting 96. So
it's like last year when Tyler and I sat down for the Duke NC State scrimmage, and NC State trotted out Shane Van Dam from SUNY Cortland, who nobody had heard of at the time, and he was throwing 96, 97. And we're like, this guy just came from D2 or D3, and he was throwing
just fuzz balls.
How did someone miss this?
Yeah, it happens all the time.
Yeah,
it's just crazy. Awesome. Well, that does it for us, and we'll see you next week.